We will figure it out, but, okay. This is Senate Finance on January 27th, and I will start where I just left off.
Okay.
We are continuing our walkthrough of bills in committee. I want us to just find out what everything is, and then we'll just start prioritizing what we're gonna be able to take up. I thought we were finished, but we got 3 more this morning. So, this is where we are. And I think part of what I'm doing is treading water till I can get a sense of what we're supposed to do, we're gonna try to do around school taxes and the ed fund, because that's at this point, they're gonna decide what they're gonna do before we can decide how we're gonna pay for it. We do have, is it 220 or 222, the pro tem's budget, which I know they would like to get out of here this week. I think it's 220. And I'm going to try and do that, but let's see, we've got some more witnesses coming in. And I'm still trying to get some taxpayer representatives to come in and give us their side of the issue. But today we are going back, almost like morning committee, healthcare. So Jen, welcome, and you're gonna walk through 251.
Yes, great. So for the record, Jen Carter from the Office of Legislative Counsel.
We got
Yes,
some-
I'm saying the
we got-
bill sponsor is on the
Yes.
committee.
I'm just
We'll
going
let you
straight
talk
ahead.
first.
Would you mind if I introduce it really quick?
No, you're on the agenda even.
Great, thank you. So I did expect this to go to health and welfare. I'm certainly glad it's here. If that's a course for it, I definitely support just further conversation about it. This is would require, I think, all health insurance companies as well as Medicaid and state insurance company to cover a very rare issue, illness that affects about 1 in 12,000 kids. So between 3 and 12-year-olds. I've been talking with advocates, those that have kids with this in Essex and one in Burlington. They know of about 7 kids in Vermont that have this. I'm going to try to pronounce it correctly. Pediatric acute onset neuropsychiatric syndrome. What this bill would do, in my understanding, but Jennifer Carvey is going to correct me, would just mandate that insurance companies cover this one aspect of treatment that's not currently covered. It actually keeps getting denied. And so I have denial letters and I have an idea of what this is costing. Middle-class families with good insurance still can't bring their kids to take them to get this proven treatment that isn't cheap, but when you're paying out of pocket, it's very expensive. That in other states, and if you look at this packet, which I know is from Virginia, on the 3rd page, it does show nationwide other states that have actually started to require insurance companies to cover this immune. I want to get it right. It's IVIG is the short term for it. It's IVIG, and I will get that acronym if needed.
Immunoglobulin therapy.
Thank you. Immunoglobulin therapy. So that's a very expensive treatment service. I can go into what the details are, but I just want to also say that hearing the stories about families with kids with this illness, it's heart-wrenching. So the kids just all of a sudden, unexpectedly, and they can clearly diagnose this, will all of a sudden become suicidal and violent and very dangerous on a variety of fronts. And so this isn't just acting up. This isn't just bad parenting, not at all. This is just the kids being exposed to some brain inflammation that they can be. And there's studies that this smoke from wildfires are also compounding this. That's where I thought health and welfare would be the community of the appropriate
We
jurisdiction.
do the walkthrough. The more I listen to you, the more I think I feel comfortable. Seeing this one, I'll take back biomarkers.
Sure. So to succinctly say,
And see this one to health and welfare.
I don't think it'd be a tremendous amount of money if
Yeah.
it was required in Vermont and there was a precedence in a nationwide initiative to try to get more coverage of these things. And I just appreciate y'all taking time to set it
Okay.
down.
What's the treatment? Yeah.
So my understanding is it's an IV treatment. So that is not currently being covered, where the kid either for a day for 5 hours or 2 days, depending on it. Sometimes, it's not like every month. There are some extreme circumstances where you might need to go every month to go spend 5 hours in a specialized environment where they hook an IV up to the kid and do this immunoglobulin therapy. That's what's not currently being covered. There are a bunch of other services that are covered traditionally by insurance companies. This one, it keeps getting denied. But there's a proven efficacy that, again, health and welfare is where doctors like to testify in New Hampshire does cover this. So there's discussion.
Disorder disease.
We will get some people in to talk about it, or we'll send it to Health and Welfare and they can. Yeah, I'm starting to have flashbacks to autism and floor time and
Yeah.
that was proven to help, but insurance companies didn't cover it and so we will, if we can, what we will, if it's insurance coverage, it will come back to us. The question is whether we're gonna have the time to do it justice. It will probably go to Health and Welfare. But
What happens medically if it's untreated?
Get worse. So that's where I want to hear from the doctors so that I will misstate anything in the field that they recognize, but it can get compounded and the brain can inflame from the damages.
No, what are we talking about?
My understanding, and this is where if you continue this conversation at JFO note or those that understand these, if I do the math of 7 kids in Vermont that might need or might not need this service, you're looking at $70,000 to $100,000. I'm guesstimating from back of the math, back of the envelope math from what's estimated in this Virginia documentation and advocacy.
yeah, I mean, if it's $70,000,
Go to that. Yes.
if it's,
Insurance coverage for it is not
yes,
Yeah.
full amount,
yeah, it's
but they're making.
it's how much it escalates the insurance cost. This is just a bad year to be talking about that, but and it will depend on, is it 10,000 once a month or 10,000 a year? And we'll hear from the insurance companies. And we will hear at least from some experts, if we, I'm sure we can find some. Okay,
Want to look at the language?
yes, let's look at the language.
And Jen Harvey from the Office of Legislative Counsel. And we'll put the language up on the screen. We're looking at S 251, which is titled an act relating to health insurance coverage for diagnosis and treatment of certain pediatric neuropsychiatric conditions. And it would add a new provision in Title 8 in the health insurance chapter on the diagnosis and treatment of these conditions. It has some definitions. So there are actually 2 related conditions. One is the acronym is PANDAS. It's pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorders associated with streptococcal infections. And the other one is PANS, which is pediatric acute onset neuropsychiatric syndrome, PANS. So we're talking about PANDAS and PANS here, just by acronym.
Okay,
They're long phrases. So it requires a health insurance plan. And so here we are talking about major medical health insurance plans. We're talking about the individual and small group and fully insured large group markets, as well as state employees plan and VHI, the teacher plans. Medicaid is not included in here. I think you'd want to hear testimony. I'm not sure they need to be because of the fairly broad requirement in Medicaid for coverage of the early periodic, no, I'm not doing it right, but diagnosis and treatment, EPSDT, that just basically requires anything a kid medically needs, they are entitled to receive under Medicaid. So I don't think we need Medicaid in here if it's strictly for pediatric conditions, but we can talk to Diva about that.
Okay.
So it require a health insurance plan to provide coverage for the medically necessary diagnosis and treatment of PANDAS and PANS that is prescribed or ordered by the covered individual's treating healthcare professional. And it says the covered treatments shall include antibiotics, medication therapy, and mental health services to manage neuropsychiatric symptoms, immunomodulating medicines, plasma exchange, and intravenous immunoglobulin therapy, which is that last one I think is the use specifically that Senator Chipman was mentioning. Coverage for PANDAS and PANS would need to adhere to the treatment recommendations set forth in current clinical practice guidelines published in peer-reviewed medical literature or endorsed by organizations composed of expert treating healthcare professionals. I think this is an emerging field, and so some of this is still being developed. A health insurance plan shall not impose greater co-insurance, co-payment, deductible, or other cost sharing, so other greater out-of-pocket requirements for coverage of the diagnosis or treatment of PANDAS or PANS than apply if the diagnosis and treatment of any other physical or mental condition under the plan. It's a fairly common provision we have in health insurance coverage mandates. For billing and diagnosis purposes, and again, this gets to the emerging nature of the research on this. PANDAS and PANS may be coded as autoimmune encephalitis until such time as the American Medical Association and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services create and assign a specific code for PANDAS and PANS. There's not one now, or at least there wasn't that much working on this. After a specific code has been established, PANDAS and PANS can still be coded as autoimmune encephalitis or PANDAS or PANS. If PANDAS or PANS is known by a different common name in the future, that name can be used for coding purposes, and this section would apply to that disorder or syndrome. Okay. Just trying to keep up with whatever might be emerging.
Yes, you don't have to come back and audit,
Exactly.
like the patient's Bill of Rights this morning.
And section 2 is the effective date. This is kind of this fairly standard health insurance mandate rollout, which is it would take effect next January and apply to all plans issued on and after that date when they are issued, offered, or renewed, but not later than January of 2028.
Okay.
One other piece on cost, just to mention, is that there is, we haven't enacted a lot of new mandates since the Affordable Care Act. And that is at least a part because there is a requirement for state defrayal for the state to pay the additional premium for the marketplace plans that is attributable to a new mandate. So there would potentially be a fiscal note on this. Now, if we're talking about a few people, a few patients and cost that is amortized across plans, it may not have a significant impact, but just wanted folks to be aware of that.
Someday, like, we've done a number of these.
Yeah.
And they've all been like decimal dust, but eventually.
Right, we haven't done many actual mandates. We have done some changes to existing mandates that did not trigger the state deferral requirement. But you would need to get, I think, an actuarial estimate from the carriers about what the increase would be, and then understand, how that would apply to the plans.
Thank you. I'm Jen. I'm trying to remember. We did a bill a few years ago, I think. That's covering something related to eyes.
Could be hearing aids.
Hearing aids. Perfect. I knew you would know. Remember.
Yes.
Thank you. I was like, eyes, ears, nose. It was one of those. There was a whole process that went through to determine how to cover it and whether.
So we started by requiring the coverage in the large group plan while the state sought to modify our benchmark plan, where there were certain parameters we could modify our benchmark plan within, and you directed DEVA to go out into the legislature to look at the DEVA and DFR together to cost out a few different services. I remember infertility services was in there, and I think there was maybe dentures. There was one other.
Yeah.
And they came back with which of those would fit under the cap and fit within what we were able to add under the federal opportunity to revisit our benchmark plan. But I don't know that approach works for other services necessarily.
Okay.
And I don't know if the cost of doing all of that work would actually be significantly different than what the probably small, I would estimate, but I have no actual idea. But the small incremental increase would be to premiums from including this benefit.
Okay, but I wasn't sure if that was that kind of, if we add something that's a requirement to health insurance plans, we don't have to do the benchmark.
We don't have to go through the benchmark process.
Okay.
We would just be subject to, the benchmark process was instead of state defrayal in a way, but it was sort of an allowable avoidance of the state defrayal by building it into our benchmark plan, because we had because of some new flexibilities that were added at that time in the federal law for determining which plan is the state's benchmark plan. It gave us a little room under the cap.
Okay. I was trying to remember, but so thank you for clearing that up.
Okay. Any other questions for Jen at this point? Okay, thank you. So we're all going to learn.
Yeah.
Doctor. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
You've got some people that would like to testify, their names to Charlotte. And
So we have doctors in Vermont that treat this right now.
Well, okay, so yes, there are doctors in Vermont that treat this, and then there's an expert in Dartmouth. I don't know the answer to that, but I know the kids are getting treated in Vermont. But I have presumably Vermont doctors.
And it may be that some of the things other than the piece that isn't covered are being treated, so they would have familiarity with the symptoms and with the prognosis.
Probably not being confined to French.
It covers most of it. It's just this one IVIG that's the issue. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
And it may also depend on the plan. We only control a small segment of the
Right,
market.
sure.
Yeah, so even if this passes, it's not clear that everyone who would be affected would be.
And importantly, they're not all prescribed the IVIG. It's just one of the last options that they like to do that has approved evidence.
thank you. So
I would just say that
wow, we're
if
ahead
we
of
do this
schedule.
one, we have to be prepared for
Lots
of other different people coming in.
Wait, I thought we weren't gonna do this. We're behind.
Charlotte?
Don't have a deadline.
Charlotte, what's that? What's
It's
that?
the report, Seal.
Oh, I thought we were just letting if the other committees wanted to keep it.
I think we were gonna let everything
Okay.
cease. Since nobody here knows what any of them are, nobody reads
Wow, I
them.
thought we were gonna get the attorneys in to tell us what they were. But if people
Getting
don't
the
wanna do it, it
attorneys
just
in, had-
seems like we don't have.
every time I schedule it, people have better things to do.
Well, the one thing about these reports is there may be something that we ought to be reading.
Yes,
We don't know what these things are, and to have someone come in to tell us what each of these are and what their objectives are is probably going to be useful.
see if we can do that. Schedule an hour, a half hour.
Don't talk fast.
Yeah,
It's a
a
useless
half an
report. We
hour.
ought to be able
We
to
don't have.
know that in a few words.
Some of them aren't even reports. It's like that one that I showed you. It was like a recommendation
Yeah.
from the board. I don't know why it's on that list. And that's why.
Somebody asked, I don't know, I mean, yeah, well, that's the one, the uses for the, I think it's the first one. The, goes the VSAC, bonding, excess bonding capacity.
Yeah,
That gets reported to the E-board, it gets voted on. At least once a year, maybe twice. And it's monitored. I think that information should be there if we ever want to find it, but I don't know that someone needs to type it up, and at least now we're not killing trees, they can email it to us.
I'm just interested in whether or not there are any reports there that are particularly useful for providing the oversight function we ought to have.
Yeah,
And it's, from the list, it's hard to tell.
and
exactly. That's why we need somebody to come in and tell us what they are, and why they
Okay.
get onto the
so
list.
we will schedule that. And then I don't want to let you out of here for 10 minutes because you won't come back.
That's untrue.
We'll come back
Not that
eventually.
we will come back.
I'm presenting type two as well. I could speak to it now, but without John Gray in the room, I.
Yes,
Oh,
another
well,
one?
we could start with yours, and then when John comes in, he can walk us through.
You want me to go ahead?
Yeah, this is S-269.
So this is purely tax, and it has to do with the property tax credit and how income is calculated towards it. There are families with individuals in their household that have disabilities that warranted SSI, supplemental security income, supplemental safety
Yeah.
income, SSI.
Security.
So this isn't social security
Medicare.
payment, yeah. So this is SSI income, which I understand that's about from a Google search, $115 million a year comes into Vermont in SSI payments, and the average of the number of households that get it is, I'm guessing it's between $8,000 and $9,000. So this isn't a ton of money that is used in the current property tax credit determination in the current ability or the current system. But there is families and constituents that have showed how by getting this SSI income, it's pushing them out of the income bracket to get the property tax credit. So they're asking to exclude SSI income from qualified individuals in their household from the property tax credit calculation. That's my understanding of what this bill would do. I was honest with the constituent is I know this is going to have a tax cost, and I'm betting this conversation has come up before. So I don't know what the macro aspects of this are, what the total cost would be, how many people it would affect. And I also haven't overlaid it with the Act 73 contemplated exemption, which is, I think, more progressive. There's less of a cliff. So that's the
Yeah,
background.
I mean,
Well,
we are moving to a new system. It would depend on how many people.
has this come up before in your years?
Well, this is similar to the bill that I introduced on the unpaid caregiver tax credit that would exempt the income
Right.
of the caregiver person. Yeah, it's a similar
Every
concept.
year something comes up. I remember college students, if you're working and you have income and you're living in a household, the argument is that money is available to help pay the property taxes or the fuel bill but it's money that's available. And we excluded a certain amount, like a student, a minor who's working.
We do that now?
I think so, but it has been a number of years. But the argument was, look, my kid works as a lifeguard in the summer. That's his book money for college. But if your kid's out working construction and making $100,000 a year and living at home,
So I don't know what the implications of this.
but the argument was that that money was available, but
My impression from my constituents, these are kids or adults with disabilities.
yes, these are adults with disabilities that are getting social security income. But some of those adults that you can't work to get SSI.
Yeah, I don't know.
So you were saying it's $8,000 on average?
From a Google search, this is where I want JFO. My results were, we could take in about $115 million a year comes into Vermont from the federal government to households that qualify for SSI to about 14,000 households. So doing the averaging out. So that's where I would get the estimate that from this personal experience, she has her adult son in her house and gets $8,000 to $10,000 a year that is pushing her to not be qualified for the property tax credit.
So the thing about that is that the tail on a property tax credit, it goes from 90 down to like 115. So by the time you get to 107,000 as opposed to 115,000, getting a credit, not getting a credit is not that much more. Right?
Yeah, because
It tails off pretty quick.
It tails off.
Yeah.
But to your point, if we go to the new, world order or whatever we're calling the exemption, exactly, thank you. Then that would have a slightly different effect because the income levels were different. We've smoothed them out, so there's not as much of a cliff.
It's a portion of your house that's exempt. You don't get the
But those
property.
for like 35 grand. Where it slopes down.
I honestly don't know. I thought there was a cliff, but that's where I think John Gray.
We keep trying to move the cliff, but we have not adjusted the house value
between those years.
Sweet spots like this.
since because we've been talking about a new structure and we haven't righted that homestead, non-homestead, which has crossed, and always the non-homestead was supposed to be higher. And I finally figured out why my biggest ski town probably can't pass a bond to pave their roads because their property tax values are so high. $500,000 property is a garage. That they're few year-round residents. Because they're being taxed on such high value property, even though their income is fairly low, are taxed out. So they can't afford, I mean, well, you've got a town that has massive amounts of non-homestead taxable property. And they can't pass a bond, put up a street light or pave a road. And I kept saying, well, why not? Because you can tax, I can understand
Sure.
maybe not paving the parking lot, or fixing the roof at the school. And it finally, I've listened to enough emails to understand that an awful lot of the folks that are year-round residents are retirees on fixed income. And their properties are so valued, are so high, their taxes are really high.
And their house rich.
Their house rich. And that's what the new one is supposed to do, but we haven't adjusted. I mean, we were arguing over $200,000 worth of house value being exempted. It slows down to 450 now, but it's a pretty rapid slope. You only get a portion of it. But right now, 450 is a 2-bedroom raised ranch in this town. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people really getting nailed, but the question is, how many people would this exempt? And I said,
8 to 9,000.
14,000 households from Dr. Google.
so
I think we need to find out from tax department and JFO.
I mean, that is rough. I mean, 150 million at your average income is rate for 2.7%. It's like 3 million bucks. J.P. Morgan tells us that.
Yeah.
So my apologies if I should have done more digging in the background on
no,
this.
I mean, this, we have probably more when we started. And I remember there were irrevocable trusts, which was also for a disabled relative.
Hmm.
But the money was in a trust that couldn't be touched, and it was being counted as income for the family. And the discussion has happened, but not with this group. It's when I need my guru sitting in that seat that can tell me everything that was thought. As part of the 19 Act 60 deliberation.
You need that documentation destroyed.
That's, they were all in his head, and understanding them sometimes was challenging. John should be here momentarily.
I'm happy to present my bills if you all would like me to.
Sure, we'll get a head start on all of them.
Great.
Hey, coming up, good, okay, yep.
So I have two bills that I'm planning on introducing today. One is S280. And I think, as you all know, I have a lot of blood, sweat, and tears invested in school construction here in the state of Vermont. I was on the School Construction Aid Task Force of 2023, and then the State Aid for School Construction Task Force of 2024. This past summer, I was on the redistricting task force. I have my own personal experience with the closure of Burlington High School, and then I've just been listening to superintendents and school boards pleading for help when it comes to school construction. So that is the genesis of this bill. That's why I decided to put this bill in. We have the second oldest building portfolio after Alaska in the whole country. And our buildings many of them anyway, are outdated. They're dangerous. I sometimes call them cruel when it comes to accessibility. And as you'll see, if you dig into, I had Charlotte post a couple of documents. One is the redistricting task force report, and the other one is the school construction aid task force report. But as you'll see, the school construction needs that we have in the state are just becoming a really big cost driver. So when we're talking about cost drivers being healthcare and mental health services, you've got to add school construction in there. There's a document that I've asked Charlotte to put in the folder, which is operation and maintenance for all of the SUs and SDs in the state. And, you know, the yearly total, and this is not including deferred maintenance, is for 2024 was $200,453,779. That does not include outstanding school district debt, which is 480 million. So each year we're paying more and more for debt and just for ongoing maintenance and operations. I wanted to say that on page 33 of the redistricting task force, and that is Appendix C, I believe, you can see that the increase in spending on operations and maintenance in this fiscal year 25-26 is 27.1%, which equates to $27.6 million. And that's just the increase in 25-26. So what this bill sets out to do is create a new property tax classification. And when you look at the bill, it should look pretty, it should be something that you've seen before, but it sets out a new property tax classification, and it would tax second homeowners at a higher rate. It keeps seasonal camps out of the equation, which I know is important to folks, but it would seek to tax second homes at a higher rate and start adding some money to the school construction special fund. And it certainly would not solve the problem, but it would start addressing some of the needs, and it would certainly, you know, just help us get started to really address this critical issue that for some reason we talk about a lot, but we're not actually doing much to solve, unfortunately. And then I'll let Kirby go into the details.
Okay. Not here yet, because we're way ahead of ourselves, but John is here.
Nice.
So we're gonna go back with just sponsors who also happen to be members of this committee, telling us why they put bills in. So we've already heard from Senator Chittenden on 269. And when you get yourself in here and your mind wrapped around this, whatever else you were having fun doing, we could walk through that. And then I think Kirby's got the next two, right? Yeah, next three.
Good luck to Kirby. And also to me.
So John, while you were out of the room, the discussion, two things that came up that I was like, I wish John Gray was here. Is there currently a cliff with the property tax credit that people fall off of when they make a certain amount of money? And then the other one is there an exemption for a college kid, like a certain amount of income if an older college kid lives in your house, or has there been in years
I
past?
know there's been discussion. I thought we
Isn't it
had
considered a
that.
dependent?
May not.
Is it for dependent?
I believe, and I will pull up the draft because we can look at the definition of household income, which I think speaks to this. But John
On the
Gray,
tax form.
John Gray, Office of Legislative Counsel. There are cliffs, right? We have the standard income cliff. So if you happen to be at a threshold and you were bumped above, right, then you could lose that availability to you. And that's part of what animated thought on the homestead exemption structure in Act 73 was to have a smoother curve, right? But in existing income sensitivity measures in existing law are quite step-like, right? They're quite dramatic steps.
So if I was making, I think the cliff's 990, if I had $88,000 of income and then my adult son who lives with me getting SSI income gets me $8,000. Would you contemplate approximately how much you're dropping your property tax credit is going to reduce? Like going above a clip?
Oh, I don't know what the, yeah, I don't know how that
That'd
would,
be joint, we have to get.
Do you have charts on that?
yeah, and it also would be, at least as currently set up, but not in the future construct, would also be a function of what the yields are in that given year. As you know, like the actual maximum income for eligibility for the property tax credit is not in statute. While we have the statutory factors, the maximum income is actually a function of where the income yield and the property yield meet. So it's been decreasing over time as the yield has changed, but it's not an outright decision to lower the income threshold.
So we will have Julia come in.
So here we go. S269. I would guess, although I wasn't in the room to hear this, this is a bill that's pretty suitable to a kind of plain English description of what it's doing. I don't think that the language itself is super complicated. There are some stylistic changes in here that are not part of the core of the bill. They're just stylistic updates we make as we update the statutes. But this is a bill that proposes to exclude supplemental security income payments from the definition of household income for purposes of calculating the homestead property tax credit and renter credit. So this would be decreasing the income for households that happen to receive the supplemental security income payment for the purpose of making them more available, more access to the property tax credit, potentially bumping them in or reducing them to a lower income threshold. So we're in Title 32, Section 1 at the very bottom of page 1, and we're amending the definitions section here to touch the household income definition. There's a couple of other definitions in here I will touch. And so the first is page 2. We were just talking about children. Household is for any individual, the individual and the other persons who resided with that individual in the principal dwelling. This is a stylistic update. It's not a substantive update. But household does pick up all persons who resided in that dwelling. And then household income itself, which is the key definition we're talking about here, means modified adjusted gross income, which we'll come to in a second. And it captures, it's the modified adjusted gross income received in a calendar year by all persons of the household while members of that household. So that could include a dependent within the household, right? We can go through some of the other technical pieces here. I don't think they're like, these are just parts of existing law that are not being touched, but just note that there are some complexities to how the household is defined, right? If someone's under, for instance, like a protection order, or they're legally separated or divorced, the statutes recognize this and don't count that person toward the household income, right? So household income doesn't mean the modified adjusted gross income of the spouse or former spouse for any period that they're not a member of that household. If they are legally separated or divorced, again, this is just existing law, but just noting there are complexities around what constitutes the household, and the law attempts to recognize on a regular basis on which you might think it's unfair to count someone toward that household income. So just to explain why we have so many different terms here, we have household income, then we have modified adjusted gross income, and then we have federal adjusted gross income, right? We have lots of different kinds of income here. We're calling out household income as a definition because we're trying to pick out the people whose income we pick up. And that's really what that definition speaks to, is who among a household is being counted. And then modified adjusted gross income is because the state is changing things about federal AGI to get at what they count as appropriate measures for determining someone's income. And so that's really what this bill is about, is it's saying we're going to exclude from modified adjusted gross income supplemental security income payments. They aren't going to count toward your income. You'll probably have heard in the past Kirby talk about above the line and below the line. To produce your adjusted gross income at the federal level, you're taking deductions to get at that so that you're above the line to get to your federal AGI. And then you may make itemized deductions below that, below the line deductions. But your AGI is being touched here to create basically a state construct of what appropriate income is for purposes of the PTC. And so again, we don't have to go through all the technicalities of the existing law, but just note this is the place you can look to see what the components of modified adjusted gross income are. And the real change that we see, these are just stylistic updates. The real change is on page 4. So we're in a section that's adding to federal AGI a bunch of things that the state wants to count for purposes of household income. And one of the things that the state adds through this statute on page 4, line 2, is payments received under the Federal Social Security Act. And so the way to get rid of supplemental security income payments, if you want to exclude them, is to make sure that they aren't picked up in this call out. So payments received under the Federal Social Security Act other than supplemental security income payments. So this is preventing it from being added back into the definition. It sounds very strange, but this is the way to exclude SSI from household income for purposes of the PTC. You just have to make sure that you don't add it back in when you add in the other payments received under the Social Security Act. So things like your Social Security disability insurance. And if you think about it, they're quite different programs in the first place. I imagine you guys might have talked some about it, but your disability insurance is you pay in over your life, right? The entitlement you get for paying into this. So supplemental security income is just a needs-based program. If you meet the conditions for access to this, you're getting support through this program, and they're even raised through different means. So unlike the payments you make across your lifetime into Social Security, supplemental security income is just raised through general U.S. Treasury funds. So different programs, but we have to make sure that we don't count them for purposes of household income. And that's what this line is doing. That's really the core of the whole bill. I did include a lot of other text here just because I wanted to point out some other pieces so that you could confirm there aren't other places in which this might need to be removed. And one of the places that I wanted to point to was, just a second, all stylistic updates here on page 6. This subdivision deals with income for purposes of the renter credit, right? So we've been talking about the property tax credit, but for purposes of the renter credit, we have this definition of income. And I just wanted you guys to see income means federal adjusted gross income, and it's increased by this list of items, including this, which might at first glance seem to pick up supplemental security income payments. 75% of the portion of Social Security benefits as defined under this federal statute. And the reason I included it is just so I can tell you, it is not picked up by this. This statute is really speaking to Title II of the Social Security Act, which is specific to Social Security disability payments, and your supplemental security income payments are made under a different title entirely in the federal code. It's Title 16. So just confirming for you, if you were looking at this afterwards and said, hey, it says Social Security here, why didn't you exclude it in this place? It's because supplemental security income payments are not included in this. The last piece to note about the bill, the final page, page 7, proposed language here for the effective date is to have this apply retroactively. So this would apply to taxable years that began this year. So basically your next year's at the determination of the PTC reliant on this year's income, you would have this exclusion from household income. So it's the concept, I'll just state it, the concept is simple: exclude supplemental security income payments from the definition of household income. We just have to go through all this strange limited drafting to achieve that.
And next question. I'm assuming you're not the person we should ask about the money part of it.
That is correct. I love that.
I'll bring.
I've already got Julia and tax in my notes. Maybe Kirby.
I'm not trying to get tax advice from my constituents that inspired this bill, but I'm curious of what you just described. Is there an obvious way that maybe people are having their adult children with disabilities that are living with them to have them be renters in their house? And would that no longer be part of the same household income if they charged $1 a year to rent a space? You understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, you're saying, are there steps that they could take kind of absent any changes to law to achieve an outcome where they wouldn't count toward household income? I don't know off the top of my head. It's interesting because if the household is, any individual and the other persons who resided with the individual in the principal dwelling at any time during the taxable year. So I don't know that renting solves that problem. If they're still within the principal dwelling, you would. But it's an interesting thought, yeah.
We will see if we can figure the cost.
The one thing I can offer on that front is I recall first discussions of this, we thought it might be simpler to determine the cost. And as more thought was given to it, I think some of the interactions of like how individualistic the determinations are for the PTC income, the rates that you have in your local town revealed that it's it's not as simple as it might seem to calculate the financial impact. But I won't speak for those guys.
With that point, would you say it would be just as difficult to implement, or is it just just
The implementation's not, not that as far as I can tell, this would be a simple thing to just say, this does not count towards we're not going to tally this up when we determine your household income for purposes of the PTC.
I think the thing that might be more difficult is how many people would then qualify for income sensitivity. That
Yep.
cost gets added to the tax rate,
Yep.
and it would depend on how many people were out there
And where they fall.
and where they fall.
And I don't know. This is me sort of wildly speculating, which I shouldn't do. But to your point about administration, okay.
Sorry, John.
No, I've been doing it, no,
That's been going on in this committee, so jump right in.
just one of my thoughts on administration would be, unlike social security benefits, which are taxable, supplemental security income is not taxable. And so intuitively, I would think this is a measure, if you're currently capturing this in household income, you're having to provide that additional information in a way that might not necessarily show up in the first instance in your federal income, right? So I would think that removing something that doesn't in the first instance show up in your taxable income might actually be simpler, but what do I know? That is my wild speculation.
I would think, you have to report it separately.
Good, John.
Then you just don't report it. Next year, my income is $8,000. Household is $8,000 less. We probably should get the tax department or we can get it online. Your Vermont tax form has a whole thing you go through, for what is included. There's household income at the federal level, and then when it's one of those add back in.
Yep. Exactly.
For your household income for the purposes of property taxes.
we should stop adding that back?
Yeah, that's kind of my point, is it's
Yeah.
one less thing you add.
Take out the line. The question would be,
Macro impact of that on the
Yeah. it doesn't sound. But as you can see, we have resisted doing that in the past. And the minute you start making exceptions, you could be opening a floodgate, which would be the other thing as I said, I know students who work in the summer or on weekends has been controversial in the past. That's going to buy school books. I understand we now have more than a few 20, even 30 somethings who are still living at home.
I'm living that dream.
On which side? Which side?
That's what it is.
That's the 18.
And so it's like once you start exempting something, there will be other things. And is it worth doing when we are contemplating a complete change in system at about the time this we don't expect? But we will know more by the end of the year about contemplation and reality. So, probably won't act on this next week,
Thanks for your time, this.
okay?
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
You, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Kirby should be here any minute. Kirby should be here. Folks, we are ending too early today.
Should we take a little break?
Kirby is due here momentarily, so no, you can't take a break.
No.
You
As a-
guys want to ask me anything about school construction?
No,
How perky you are. Martine.
and I think, Martine, there, you've got the second one. You've got two. One is a second homes tax. What is 282?
Yes.
What's that putting into a school construction?
So, yeah, so the first one, the first one was a second home tax, and the second one, which is S-286, that is a 2% surcharge on existing meals and rooms taxes to be placed in a school construction special fund. So those are my two. Happy to answer any questions that I might be able to answer.
You would raise the rooms and meals across the board by 2%.
That is correct. And again, it wouldn't solve the problem, but estimates we're looking at for 2027 about $58,540,000 according to the tax department.
Do you have any wedding planners in your district?
Do I have any what?
Wedding planners. We
Yes,
looked-
we do have wedding planners.
Yes, we looked at this when we were looking for money to buy down the tax rate. Was it just 2 years ago or 3? And it would put us with one of the highest tax rates in New England. I think the highest. And to say, well, people that go out to dinner won't notice it, but it was the wedding planners who came in and said, I am looking at an X thousands of dollars, and most of that is rooms and meals, and that's where it would hurt. So I'm sure we will hear from them, but we will look at that. We have looked at it, and we did an extra percentage on short-term rentals in order to generate that money. I think it was 3 years ago. And would your 2% go on top of that?
On top of short-term rentals?
Yeah, we put an extra surcharge on short-term, 2%,
Beyond the
up to 3% on short-term rentals, rooms and meals. To
I'm-
pay, to earn money, so this would be an extra 5.
Yeah, I would have Kirby
We'll
speak.
have to figure that. Well, I think that's more joint fiscal or tax,
Okay.
about what that would look like.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear this wouldn't be popular with everybody, but at the same time, as I said before, we have all these crises, school
Yeah.
construction being one of them, and we need to do something. We need to take some action. So that's what this is.
Okay.
Taking action.
We will look at it and see if there's something we can do. We also only did it for the short-term rentals because I was concerned about taking out one segment of the market and increasing theirs when we weren't doing it for other short-term rentals like motels and hotels. And at that point, it would have made us the highest in New England, I believe. I'm looking at Senator Brock to see if his memory is better than mine. But that again, well, it's all a balancing act.
And
Well,
yet we're so much lower than Canada. So we're looking
they aren't coming here anymore.
true, but we're going there.
Not with a 15% sales tax.
Well, I think it's a good point. They are a neighbor and
They are
people
a neighbor.
often, compare to
They are.
neighboring states, and Quebec is just as much of a neighbor as New Hampshire
New
and
Hampshire.
New York. So
But
I think it's a fair comparison. Senator Bueller.
so we can see. Be interesting to see how much, if more flows north than flows south. Do more of us go to Canada than Canadians come here, and what that ratio looks like?
These days, we have a larger population, so.
Yeah.
There are more people that go there than they come here. but we'll just-
Except, yeah, we'll look at that.
New Hampshire's lowered their mills to 8 down, they went down from 9, and it seems us.
Okay, Kirby. We are running behind. We cannot get Tucker to come in and walk us through those studies. So we're gonna see if, maybe if we can shrink that list a little bit, we could then ask him for a summary of the ones that that we've decided we don't need. That might be more manageable. Because he has to do it for everyone. That's just a huge load. We get comparatively few studies. Okay, Kirby, we have let the sponsors walk through why they've done their bills, because we're ahead of time. So the floor is yours, 280, 282, and 286.
You're like me to just go in numerical order.
Just go right straight through.
All right. Begin, legislative council. We have 3 bills to look at. I think Senator Gulick is on all of them.
Yeah,
So for the first one, it's introduced by Senators Gulick, Byhowski, Hardy, Watson, and White. Sounds like a law firm a little bit.
Could be.
The bill proposes to create a new property tax classification. This is the language from Act 73 for the most part. And the increased rate for residential properties used as second homes and short-term rentals, Act 73. But this does go ahead and set a tax rate. The bill would further create a new classification for non-homestead seasonal residential properties. Basically treating seasonals like non-homestead, non-residential. To give you some heads up about discussions happening in the House right now when it comes to the classifications. I think Ways and Means is also currently considering a similar, where it's in that case, making sure that the definitions don't be seasonal in the non-homestead residential classification. And while we're talking about it, I'll say it's something that was flagged by the Department of Taxes in that report that they put out recently on it.
okay. I think my intention, since I think this is the second bill we've gotten for second homes tax. I fully expect one is coming from Ways and Means. And so I will not actively pursue these until we get the House bill. Unless it looks like it's stalling over there, and then
Okay.
you can take up any one of these bills.
Yeah, so I do have a draft going where I'm taking all the suggestions from the Department of Taxes. They have 8 different steps. 2 of them are in the short term, and some taking their first 2 steps and putting that into a bill right now. So just so you know, that's out there.
So this anticipates that and does that in this bill. Additional revenue generated by the higher rate would be deposited. So this would be additional revenue, I would flag.
Right.
Not all revenue from the second home short-term rentals. The additional revenue would be deposited in the new special fund for school construction. So walking through, you have the same language as Act 73 does for classifications, except non-homestead seasonal is its own classification in this one. That other draft I'm working on doesn't do it that way. It just takes seasonal and lumps it in with non-homestead, non-residential, effectively the same exact thing. Still doing that. This version. Sorry to make anybody sick if I give me through this quickly, but it's all from Act 73. This section's a little different than Act 73 because in Act 73 you had the factors that are built in with everything else in Act 73 on John's parts, the education finance stuff. Since this is separating the second homes and short-term rentals classification out of Act 73's framework, we took the factor part of Act 73 and put it into what would be current law now. So that's what Section 3 is about. Instead of a factor, it just says non-homestead residential property shall be $2 multiplied by the spending adjustment, which is double what the law says about homesteads. And that this is more conforming stuff. I'm adopting this to current law. So you see how there's like a presumption in this particular proposal that other parts of Act 73 may not make it across the finish line for whatever reason. This is this school construction 8 special fund, the Section 5, which is from Act 73. A change happening here is that it has a new revenue source that's not in Act 73. Half of the revenue generated by the education property tax imposed on non-homestead residential properties. This is just conforming language for the ed fund based on what we just saw. This is the transition provisions that were from Act 73 for the classifications in Section 7. And that is it. The same timeline as Act 73 would have had on January 1, 2028 for the classifications.
Okay, so the basic difference here is similar mechanism. I'll read a few please. Act 73 visualizes using the revenue from second homes tax, residential, non-homestead, to buy down the cost of exempting property value based on income, so that what's presently your tax stabilization payment isn't brought out of the rates. Right now, the rates are raised to cover that cost. This would cover that cost with the increased revenue from this fund. This would say that rather than, doing that with the money, it would go into a school construction fund. It's how the money is used, basically.
That is, yes, this is specifying how it's used. Act 73 right now does not try to earmark it, so it would go to the ed fund. It's anticipated though through some of the studies and things that are in Act 73 that maybe the extra revenue from the second homes and short-term rentals classification would be used for something specific. One of those things is the Department of Taxes was supposed to look, and they did, look at different ways to adjust those factors for different purposes. One of them, which I'm not sure if this is what the chair was saying, is to pay for the new version of the property tax credit, the homestead exemption. So they're, in the department's report, they do have, this was based on the knowledge we have now, this is what the factor would be if you want to pay for the homestead exemption.
Okay,
And they also have some other factor
so we
proposals.
will have tax come in because that would be. Because if we take that revenue, and you put it in the school construction fund, then we're going to have to find the money to pay for the homestead, the property exemption section. In
Yeah.
rates like we presently do and raise everybody's rates, including the people getting the exemption, to pay for it. Or we would have to find another new revenue source to cover that cost.
Thanks, Madam Chair. This is an important conversation to be having. It would be even more productive if we were doing it when we had actual numbers in front of us. But I just want to thank and commend Senator Gulick for actually trying to put some options on the table for how to fund school construction. And, you know, obviously, both of them have their downfalls, but they also both have their upsides. And we need to be thinking about this. Yesterday, I was in a school board meeting, and one of the major barriers to whatever we do is school construction. And if we consolidate a bunch of schools, we still have to be able to put our kids in schools where they fit. And most of our schools in Vermont are really small. So if you close one school and you try to put all the kids into the other school, you might have to make modifications to that school in order to adjust the school for those kids. There are also serious safety and security concerns that many of our school buildings do not meet. And those are things that school buildings need to be upgraded in order to ensure safety. Our buildings are super old. It's really expensive with the current bonding capacity of most school districts and the uncertainty of what we are actually doing here. School districts are backed against the wall when it comes to making choices about how to operate their districts. So we have to solve the problem of school construction. And I think it's really important that Senator Gulick is putting options on the table, and we have time to discuss them, but we really, it's not responsible to not have a funding source for school construction when we're contemplating such major changes in our education system.
And as far as I can tell, every one of them has a leaky roof.
Yeah, I mean, our buildings are old and they need a lot of upgrading, and whether or not we're going to move kids to new buildings, it costs money. It costs money to upgrade our buildings it's not just as easy as, you know, oh, we're going to make a new map and move all the kids to these buildings. That's not how it works. And we have to be able to fund school construction even if we just have all the same buildings, let alone making changes to our buildings and configurations of our school districts. It's just not possible without a funding source for school construction.
Right. I think we know that. I think the problem is the last time we needed a lot of schools was to build out for the baby boom. We built out in the 60s and 70s. Those schools have all coming up against their useful timeline. Other than the high school in the capital city, our schools were built probably the turn of the century, beginning of back maybe in the 30s, but they're even older. So we have kind of original schools, and then we have the baby boom schools. They're all aging out. We use our bonding capacity in the past to build new schools. My first year here is we stopped that because we had maxed out our bonding capacity and we needed to buy down those bonds because we couldn't do anything else until we did. I assume that we have found new needs for bonding, and we still are fairly maxed out in that area. We don't have a lot of wiggle room. And finding a new source of revenue is challenging. I think we all know the need. This is but that leaves us again with the homestead exemption unfunded. So we will look at it all. Hey, any other questions for Kirby on this one? We're gonna move on to 282.
Yes.
Okay, that's not interesting.
I was wrong about Senator Gulick being on all these because she's not on this one.
Thank you, Kirby.
Wait, John did that one?
No, I know all these.
No, you did that.
So this is S282. This is sponsored by Senators Zahowski, Clarkson, Major,
Okay,
Watson.
Senator Bohofsky is here. Do you want to give us just 2 minutes? You can do it from there and.
I'm happy to. For the record, Senator Tanya Vyhovsky, S282 is not just the school finance bill. It's a broader bill that is intended to try and recapture some of the federal tax cuts to some of our wealthiest Vermonters and put them back in our Vermont coffers. So it does raise, so that is the intent of the bill. It does also include the second home tax with the revenue going to the school construction fund. So it's a little bit broader. And again, is really just the intent of this was to try and fill some of the holes that we know are coming from the federal changes, with the dollars that would have gone to the federal tax revenue instead coming into our Vermont revenue. So that is really what the intent of the bill was.
Okay. And I think we've heard the corporate tax, but I think they're still working through the impact of other tax changes. We haven't, I'll see if we can get that from the tax department. This other tax changes and who is going to be impacted.
And this does include both personal and corporate. It really kind of is a throwback. It's got a Snelling surcharge flavor to it.
Okay.
Pat Titterton and I can come in and talk about those things.
Okay.
I mean, and the Department of Taxes too. Can talk
That would,
about
okay, we will
the
set
federal
that up
changes.
then.
Kirby
and Pat.
Yeah, the biggest change on the personal income tax side is the child defendant care credit being slightly extended.
Okay,
Not a lot else that directly impacts Vermont.
the child and dependent care.
Mhm.
That's not usually one we like to go after people.
So this doesn't, like I said, this is Snelling surcharge flavor,
Okay.
so it's on those higher.
We'll find out what you.
Yeah, so there's nothing in here that's directly trying to change things in direct,
Okay,
like specific changes that were happening at the federal level. Okay, so S282. I don't think I'm pronouncing anyone's names correctly. You did Senator Vyhovsky.
Vyhovsky. You got real close.
well,
I'm from Tennessee, so I'm gonna say words right. But anyway, as she explained, this bill proposes to create a personal income tax surcharge. So that's one of the things going on here. And we'll walk through that. It proposes to create what's called a wealth proceeds tax, which is a new type of concept that I don't think has been proposed in Vermont before, and we'll get into
that
that.
was across, Snelling did surcharge a percentage, but I believe it was across the board, may have exempted the lowest ranges, but that was back in the,
Was the Snelling surcharge on income or on like,
I believe it was on income. It was for my job.
okay.
It was temporary.
It was temporary.
So I think the first part here, the income tax would be, I guess, that comparable to that. But then we have the wealth proceeds in here and we have the property tax classifications. Same language as you just looked at, that's adapting it to current law. And then we have the school construction aid special funds. So getting into it. This version of the personal income tax surcharge would have one surcharge on AGI, individuals with AGI of 250,000.
That's individuals, not couples filing jointly.
That's correct. It's individuals.
So if there's two couples with that, it's at the 500.
We would look at them as individuals.
Yeah,
And if they
okay.
both had it, then they both,
I'm just asking that because I am looking at, because we start our tax bracket at relatively maybe lowest rate in the country, that we could be discouraging people, professionals, 294,000 for two people is comfortable, but not wealthy in today's sense. You may own a sailboat on Lake Champlain, but you don't own that. Yeah. I mean, just if you're trying to attract a doctor who happens to be married to an advanced practice nurse, and they can work at Dartmouth and live in New Hampshire with no income tax, to attract them here, and hospitals have tried, it's a major deterrent. And we set those rates probably close to 20 years ago. And I would like to maybe put that fifth bracket in, we're looking at somewhere around 5. And which this would fit with.
yeah, and I think that's one way to think about this, the income tax surcharges, because we use marginal brackets. It's almost like a marginal bracket. It's
Yes.
just done a little differently. But a difference is that, yeah, this is imposed on individuals. So in your example, each of the people married, you look at them individually to see if
Right.
that individual hits 250, not combined. Okay, so that's the first part of it. Is there's a surcharge of 2% of AGI at the 250 level. And then there's another level of surcharge that is 6% of the AGI exceeding 500,000. Again, looking individually at incomes. And that's really it. They would be, in with the income tax, and it would be administered the same way with the income tax.
Not really a surcharge, it's really because it's not temporary and it's not for a specific purpose.
So they're in.
Nellie was to keep us from cutting worse holes in the safety net during a major economic downturn. This would really be raising the rates.
This is a surcharge in the sense that it's a tax on top of the existing tax. But yeah, there's some semantics like there, as far as the technical legal difference though, since this is a surcharge on individuals, it is different than if you had a new bracket, because the brackets are going to be based on filing status. And this is
Okay.
not.
Okay. And this one is dedicated to the school construction fund.
Is it?
We'll see when we get there. I don't remember.
Okay,
Um,
that's what you said.
So the next part, this is the more complex thing that's in any of these bills we're looking at. This is a proposed wealth proceeds tax that uses this net investment income tax. That's a federal tax that's applies to certain types of income if a person's modified adjusted gross income is more than, for a single person, 200,000, and for married filing jointly for 250,000, you have this net investment income tax. These are the things it applies to. If you want to do a deep dive on this, I think it might be better if I come back and
Yeah.
do just this properly. So for now, for purpose of the walkthrough, I want to just give you the highlights. So the federal net investment income tax applies to capital gains, short-term and long-term ones, income from dividends, taxable interest, rental and royalty income, passive income from investments, business income from trading financial instruments or commodities, and a taxable portion of non-qualified annuity payments. So, like the name implies, income from investments. And so this is the policy here, is it's trying to get at wealth that people have that sometimes the income tax does not get at least in the short term. It's kind of a proxy thing for wealth that people have, that if you have a lot of investment income, then that's being seen as wealth proceeds, as in what you're gaining from your wealth.
Okay, just in general. You don't pay capital gains tax until you draw it down as income. If you just leave it there getting reinvested from state and local obligations outside of Vermont. I assume that's bonds, federal bonds.
This would be other states, I would think. Most other states or municipalities.
But it would be bonds, tax exempt bonds.
Yeah, I think so. There's I think for federal ones though, where that's not state block tax, so I don't think that
Touch that.
that was have not be.
I bought New Hampshire.
So this is taking the tax base for the net investment income tax at the federal level, adding some things back to it that get excluded from that. That's what you're looking
Can
at
we
here.
find out what those things are?
Yeah.
You're beyond my pay grade.
Huh.
Excluded under 26 USC number 1202.
Yeah, again, like if we want to do a deep dive, I should.
Yeah, I think,
Prepare for that.
I think we should know what they are and what the amount is.
So, as an example, though, like this big E, that would be adding back. There's some federal exceptions for certain active interests in partnerships and S corporations. So there's types of income that's excluded from the federal investment tax that is being added back here.
Is this in reaction to the big beautiful bill just compensating for that, or does it go beyond those exemptions? Or
This is not directly in response. These things weren't, this isn't making it for some change
These are
directly.
long-standing.
The sponsors, though, I don't want to speak for them about whether they see this as a proxy for those, benefits.
This is probably.
I mean,
more-
we've already gotten testimony that says that the federal tax cuts are extremely beneficial for wealthy taxpayers. And so I think that that's what this.
Well, that's. Yeah, but we need to kind of. Which wealthy taxpayers? Because we may be getting ones that aren't benefiting.
I think the testimony you had was that there are things that don't flow through to Vermont, but that wealthier people are getting a benefit from, though, at the federal level. And if you want to respond to that tax policy at the federal level by taxing more, I think that was the testimony from Carr.
But it may not be the same people. I mean,
There are only so many wealthy people. I mean, the federal
there's a
tax
thousand
credit,
of them in Vermont.
the federal tax changes last year. Every analysis of them is that they
Said they-
benefit wealthy
yes.
people and major corporations.
So we're looking at the source. What I haven't seen, and I understand you didn't have yet, was a breakdown as to which groups of wealthy people.
What do you mean by that?
Well, who do these benefit, and are they the same? Who are these going to exact more taxes from, and are they the same taxes? To say wealthy people is like saying poor people. It's it can be a pretty big group. Our group in Vermont is pretty small. I don't know what we know about it. I know the last jobs and tax bills benefited people that owned businesses more than your average taxpayer, because with the SALT exclusion, people in this $200,000, $300,000 that couldn't deduct their state and local taxes actually in general paid more. The state of Vermont made $30 million. And we didn't raise a tax under the tax cut and jobs bill. So we rewrote our tax code to give it back, but somebody paid us $30 million more. We think it was mostly the middle class. So I just want to make sure that we hone this in a little more and know who we are actually penalizing and who actually benefited. That just wealthy people is too broad.
Yeah, there were many, many changes, as you know. Yeah, so I think Pat and I would have to look at that, because your question is about, not about what flows through to Vermont, but who benefited, who's going to benefit on their federal return, what Vermonters are going to benefit on their federal return, is your question.
And probably is it people with investment income? Is it people with active businesses? Is it people that own?
And then on the corporate side, you know, the way corporate income tax works is Vermont gets a portion based on the sales into Vermont from mostly corporations that exist, you know, that are organized somewhere else. So when they pay less, they're at the federal level, stuff that flows through means that there's slightly less being shared in Vermont as well. So it's just a different way of looking at it. Okay.
Okay, so
So this
find out what those are.
Yeah. These are the things that are being added back, and I was in the middle of breaking this stuff out, but I was called in a little early, so I apologize that
That's okay.
I'm not able to go through all of these things right now. And as I think Senator Beck mentioned a moment ago, the U.S. government obligations is not something included here that any amount exempted from state taxation under federal law. So that's the tax base we were just talking about. This is the imposition of the wealth proceeds tax. So it's imposed for each taxable year on individuals, estates, and trusts subject to personal income tax in Vermont. Individuals filing a single head of household with taxable income exceeding $200,000, married filing jointly with taxable income exceeding $250,000. This is the same. This is following the way the federal investment tax works, by the way. And then individuals filing as married filing separately.
Okay, so it's filing separately. All right.
Yeah, so it's half of the filing.
Married filing jointly with taxable income exceeding. So so that's a couple filing jointly at $250,000 income, which is below our present top tax bracket. Right? Is this each individual with 250, or is this?
This is different than the surcharge we're talking about. This is this is following what they already do under federal law for the investment. The net investment tax.
Okay.
Which is it's these they use modified AGI. In this case, we're using taxable income. So there is a difference, but the numbers are the same as the federal.
Okay, maybe you would tax and join the fiscal and give us 101 federal investment tax code
Yeah,
because we have not done that in my memory.
yeah,
The wealth tax died in the other body. And this is a revenue bill, so
mhm.
I'm not sure about it coming from us. I think there's some wiggle room in there, but the general rule has been revenue start in the house. And I don't know if there's a companion bill there, but this is something we should know because it will come up, so we will, as soon as you can get it together. And
There's a version of this that's, I think, introduced today in the House.
in the house as well. Okay, good. Then we then would have time to do our learning
Yeah,
about what this is. I don't
Mhm.
file this tax bracket, so I'm
me either.
totally unfamiliar.
Yeah, so, well, to give you the walkthrough quick version. If for this Vermont version of this, what's being called the wealth proceeds tax. If your taxable income hits those thresholds, then, you would need to, you become subject to the wealth proceeds tax. And it's imposed at a rate of 4% of the lesser of wealth proceeds for the taxable year. And this defines that obviously, or federal modified adjusted gross income for the taxable year, reduced by the threshold amount, and threshold amount was also defined. And that's defined up here.
Okay, so this is actually a separate tax.
This is a separate tax
A
that
surcharge, it is a tax.
it's a tax on top of income tax that is directly targeting certain types of
Types of
income that you're receiving from investment.
Certain types of investments.
And
Is there a reason we just couldn't say you have to add this back in to your income if it's federally tax exempt?
it's not, it's also tax extra at the federal level. This,
Above or below the line?
if you have modified adjusted gross income of certain threshold amounts. And then you can become subject to this at the federal level, and the rate is 3.8. And that's applied to the lesser of net investment income. Or the excess of your modified adjusted income over the threshold amount. So a lot of the language we're seeing here is mimicking this net investment credit that's at the federal level, and then adjusting it to Vermont in some ways.
Okay,
So it is, so I think that's probably the best way to look at this is we're creating a state version of the federal net investment
Okay.
or tax.
And-
The word wealth can throw you off because wealth taxes that have been proposed in the past
Yeah.
are trying to get at property you own, like art or cars, something like that. And that's not, this is about
I see.
investment proceeds.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
And that I think we decided is pretty difficult to do.
The wealth tax that was proposed a couple years ago. Yeah, that was a big lift. This one is trying to just piggyback off of
Veterans.
what exists, federally. To make it more.
It's picking up
manageable.
IRAs. Is this picking up IRA investments? Your retirement accounts?
No,
No.
not that I.
I just don't want everyone over 65 yelling at me.
They might be allergic for other reasons. Um,
You don't have to do that now, just,
yeah,
just. Yeah,
so, yeah, so again, you know, to do the proper dive on this, I think we need to come back and just do that. But I think you are getting the gist of this.
yeah, I think need to know
Mhm,
what they are.
mhm.
And then understand, I gather they're a lot above or below, these come off below federal adjusted gross income.
Again, it's in addition to,
It's in addition to, so,
for certain taxpayers.
yeah, all right.
Okay, so then, in S 282 here, we, have the property tax classifications from Act 73. We have the seasonal classification that we had talked about in the bill before. This is all the Act 73 language. More of the Act 73 language on page 9. On page 10, you have, as I mentioned before with the other bill, us adapting current law for the rate for this, instead of using the Act 73 changes to these areas of law.
Okay, well, I think,
And the rate is $2, so it's double the homestead rate again.
what we haven't figured out yet is, since the listers haven't done all the work as to the classifications as to what tax rate would need to be set in order to raise what amount of money. Right, we don't know how many or the value of non-homestead, residential, non-seasonal. And until that work is done, we don't know what $2 would raise. We don't know what 50 cents would raise. Because we don't know the base. So
Yeah,
tax would be,
and then until it becomes effective, we probably won't.
well,
So the estimates.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay, so, we have the school, construction aid special fund from Act 73 here. We have, again, half of the revenue. So in other words, the additional revenue from the second homes and short-term rentals classification going to this fund, this bill.
rather than buying down property tax rates essentially.
And so I think your question from earlier was, are we putting the surcharge revenue or the wealth proceeds revenue in this bill into the school construction fund?
Right.
The answer is no.
No. So where's it going?
It's silent, therefore it would be the general fund.
To the general fund. Okay. So it's not going into school construction aid,
No, only the
which
classification
is
for
really an income tax, so it should go to the general fund, and that's fine. They'll love it, they can use it. But it's not helping us find the revenue to both pay for the homestead exemptions in Act 73 and pay for school construction. Right now, we're using the same pot of money to do both of those. And we don't know what that pot of money will be. We might have enough to do both, but I kind of doubt it. So we've got some stuff to do, but we definitely have homework to do on federal tax investment classifications, deductions.
Yeah. So yes, the, at least in what's proposed here as introduced, does. Yes, it does not use those two revenue sources for education. And that's everything here. We have transition language for classifications. And we have effective dates. I don't think there's anything notable. Wealth proceeds tax will be effective January 1 next year. The income tax surcharge will be retroactive January 2026.
Okay. See if the tax department will do that. Okay. Questions, Judy? Let's,
I have a lot of questions if we keep digging into this, because it's very complex and I didn't really understand half of what you
yeah,
presented.
I think it may not, once we get there, it may not be as complex as it sounds, because there's a whole lot of federal numbers and references. Once we understand what they refer to,
Yeah.
it may not be anywhere near as complicated as it sounds. First,
So to summarize it again, because I feel like maybe I wasn't as clear, to summarize the wealth proceeds concept, just 20,000 foot view is you're looking at a person's income that's coming from certain investments, piggybacking off of an existing federal tax, using that as the tax base and applying a Vermont level tax on it.
Have we ever done that before?
I mean, our income taxes,
the state tax, I know we did,
yeah.
we separated, unseparated.
Yeah.
We used to be totally tied to the feds, everyone was,
Mhm.
and then the feds changed things and almost everyone got it undone, but we do separate state and tax.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. So S 286 is introduced by Senators Hewlett and Ski. I said those correctly this time. This bill proposes to impose a Meals and Rooms tax surcharge of 2% to generate revenue for the school construction aid special fund. So this is another way to go about funding the construction special funds. The way the surcharge would work is it applies to the meals tax base specifically. Or I'm sorry, the entire Meals and Rooms tax base,
Yeah.
meals and rooms.
So meals, that's what I thought.
Drafted different versions of different things here. So this one, yes, the entire, so A1 there on line 16 is a 2% on the rent of occupancy, so that would be the rooms tax. Line 18 there is a surcharge of 2% on the sale of each taxable meal. And 3 is the alcohol component of the Meals and Rooms tax, so it's a 2% on the sale of alcoholic beverages. So the entire Meals and Rooms tax base have a 2% surcharge. It is administered just like the Meals and Rooms tax. This surcharge allows for the invoice or bill to include, or actually requires for it to include a statement that the surcharge is for support of Vermont School Construction Aid Special Fund. There's, for a comparable thing that exists, the fuel tax allows the sellers to put on the invoice that it's for the weatherization fund. So that's if you're looking for like a comparable concept that already exists. And the deposit of the revenue is in the school construction aid special fund and this version of things takes the language from the school construction, instead of repeating it, it actually presumes that Act 73 happens in this case and amends the special fund language to add revenue from the school construction surcharge.
Yeah, there's a lot in that bill on school construction, except the funding source. I mean, there's a lot of pages of school construction.
Well, it sets up a whole program that doesn't.
Yeah.
fund.
It doesn't, we don't have money. Right. Committee conference just skipped over those 20 pages.
And those are let's walk through the three.
Bills. And we will. Yeah, I think we will try and get set up ASAP, just walking through all those federal investment tax exemptions, what they are, the impact on Vermont, if we can figure that out. And then this last one, probably be tax. I know we did do research when we did do the rooms and meal surcharge on short-term rentals. And that's still there and paying. And that's dedicated to the ed fund. This would be over and above it or a special fund. But I do remember it would put us at the highest rooms and meals in New England if we did it across the board to all short-term rentals, i.e. hotels, motels,
And restaurants.
And
in this
restaurants,
case,
yeah.
And alcoholic
and,
beverage.
yeah, so we may want to look at that. I'm feeling they will have some feelings about it. Tourism is a major industry and we can look at numbers about Canadians. But again, Canada has and most of the world has a very different attitude about taxation than this country does. Otherwise, we could fund all that single-payer health care and paid family leave and a lot of other things that people would like. So we will take a look at that too. Anything else anybody wants to hear from? Talk about? David Brock?
I am just thinking about, in effect, using an actuarial approach about tax increases. Whether there are some professionals out there that we might want to talk with as to what the likely impact would be, given all the dynamics and all the statistics and all the people and the behavior and past, just say, is there an actuarial kind of analysis as to what these kinds of taxes would be likely to do, both in terms of increasing revenue on the one hand, and on the thing that we perhaps worry about the most is on decreasing the number of people who have certain financial characteristics on whom we depend for a huge amount of the tax revenue that we have right now. What I'm saying, in other words, is there ought to be some type of analysis that ought to be done in a really professional way that says, who are we likely to chase away and what will the impact of that be?
You could ask for that. I have a feeling just the word actuarial makes it expensive.
Well, it does on the one hand, but an actuary is defined as an accountant without a sense of humor. But it's really important because you strange things, when you do things with the anticipation, you're gonna have a certain result, you may have a counter result that's actually even worse. Now, one of the ways we do that is we look at things that have happened in the past. Who else has done something like this and what's the result been? Have they made money or have they lost money?
And I think we heard last week that the limited academic study that had been done, we're still watching Massachusetts in
Yeah.
there, but they've only had 1 year and it does take a while to do things. But the indication was it might change behavior.
Mhm.
Um,
And that's the concern.
and how much difference that makes. We have a relatively small pool. Of very wealthy people.
Correct.
So,
And for each one of those people that you chase away by an action that you take, how many people of lower to middle class income do you need to replace them in order to get that revenue?
no one will notice it, I think.
I just keep thinking of that line chart that shows us we're already high.
Yeah.
So I can.
But we will look at this. If this is investment income, or we will look at. Also, what happens when the market crashes? Because it will.
Mhm.
And if it's going into a construction fund, as long as it's not needed to pay this year's bond, I'm assuming we would have to have reserves for that. It's not going into pay for an ongoing program as such. Control bonding, it would be interesting to look at. Okay,
Well, we're in a situation right now where we would benefit. My guess is probably, I won't say more, but we would benefit significantly by doing nothing to the tax structure other than, in effect, taking actions in our tax policy to actually encourage the number of multimillionaires to move to Vermont in one way, shape, or form. We'd make more money that way, but provided we aren't taking the money away from someplace else that we desperately needed.
we are going to tax their homes for those that are living here, not full-time and not paying income tax into the state.
Mhm.
So that's one group we're gonna pick up in the next year, that we are not picking up. But it's also worth looking at. We will at least go far enough to know what it is we're being asked to do. And then we can start looking at who that impacts and who benefited from the most recent tax cuts and jobs. What is it? HR 1. Okay, I got the official terminology. Totally unbiased. What, who did benefit? Who in Vermont benefited? Because the wealthiest 3%, if that's one person in Vermont, it may not be worth changing the tax code. If it's the top 20% or 10% or pick a percent, it might be that we need to know all of that before we go through it. Senator Hardy.
Yeah, I just want to repeat. We've gotten testimony on who benefited, and it was very wealthy people and large corporations. We've also gotten testimony to the fact that there is not research to support the myth of tax plight. That is, and I sent you guys some research about that, and we've said it multiple times, Senator, and it's just not a thing that happens. People
Well, I can cite numerous people
everybody
to whom it does happen.
everybody
And we
has
haven't taken testimony. from
everybody
people
has
like that, have we?
everybody has anecdotal things about everything.
Anecdotal things are personal experiences that are reported. And if you collect enough of them, they become facts and evidence.
Okay,
If you have people who
but there's-
testify who don't present it,
But
because we haven't asked
there's
them to
not
testify.
solid data about that. People move for a lot of different reasons, and lower people with lower incomes are more likely to migrate between states than people with higher incomes.
They are
That's just,
Yes,
they're moving because of, for job opportunities, for economic reasons, for family reasons. And it's just, it's frustrating to constantly have the same conversation in the committee without actually be looking at data and the research while we're having the conversation.
have not-
It seems like we have the conversations just based on personal opinion and
I think
anecdote.
there
And that's
there is
not
some research. One
okay,
of the
now we're
things that we
getting
should do
into
is
why
bring
I
folks in to
banned this
testify.
conversation in this committee. The fact is, the only data I've seen came from United Van Lines, which I don't think picks up everybody. It said wealthy people moved into the state. But there is, even from our expert last week, the national, who said that wealthy people benefited the most. There was one academic study, and it indicated behavioral changes more than moving. How much those behavioral changes would cost in Vermont, given our limited pool. It's a behavioral change. I stay one more week in my home in Florida. I mean, I might not move. It's just where I declare my primary residence. So, we will see if we can track down economic data, but we're also going to make decisions based on who's in Vermont, how many of them are there, who benefited in Vermont, with a lot more granularity than rich people. And then we're going to do a cost benefit. What would we make? What risks are we taking? What might we lose if only 1% left? 1% of 10 is a lot more than a lot bigger impact than 1% for 1,000. So we're going to look at all of that as we work through 73. And we're going to also have to find a funding source or keep actually having a significant number of taxpayers who would pay less if they didn't get income sensitivity, if income sensitivity wasn't paid for out of the rates, which is what 73 is trying to get around. Put second home tax in there and cover the cost of exempting property, a certain amount of property value based on income. And we went through at least 100 variations, and I'm pretty sure we will go through them again before we make a final decision, and then we'll probably tweak them for the next 20 years. And we might want to look at, in the meantime, because 73 isn't happening this year or next year, is we are going to, looks like, putting or being asked to put somewhere around $100,000 plus another 10 million. We're getting 10 million from the general fund is the proposal to cover 10 million out to go to transportation. Next year, there will be 20 million going in transportation, and then there will be 30 million, and eventually there will be $50 million out of the ed fund, which will be covered in $50 million more in sales tax, which, given the present economic climate, is not likely. Or $50 million in savings, or $50 million in increased property taxes, unless we can find it. But that's a new thing. If that will make it through the budget process, I don't know. But next year, we're gonna start out with a $20 million hole in the ed fund, and I don't see there being $20 million in additional funding across the hall or $20 million in savings out there. So we have some short-term problems. I cannot get a sense as to a path forward on Act 73. I'm still trying to get hard numbers from anybody as to what the estimates are for larger district rates. I was told that BOCES, which sounded promising, if not fast, and we might speed them up, weren't compatible with going to a foundation formula. But I'm not sure we can't work around that. But working out there.
What? So, what, not necessarily on that, but while we have Kirby in the chair, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So to Senator Hardy's point before she left, I just want to make clear that I'm understanding this bill is detached, is not related to that presentation we got with sponsored by the Public Assets Institute, which was talking about the big beautiful bill and calibrations that states might be considering to adjust their state tax code. These two are separate.
You mean ITEP?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, there's not direct relationships between these things. I think part of the point that the ITEP presentation was making was there, certain taxpayers got benefits at the federal level from HR 1. And there's a nuance that I think could be easily lost, is that they weren't saying that those things flow through to Vermont and affecting Vermont. They're just saying that these people got a benefit. And if you don't agree that the tax policy should be targeted towards giving these people a benefit, then you could respond by taxing them more. That group. And I think that was the point being made by ITEP, I think.
The only thing I'd say is that conversation treated me into understanding better what the federal changes are and how we might want to look more on. This conversation just seems like a big can of worms that if we go down this path, it's going to go in 1,000 different directions. I don't think we're going to get it done this session. But maybe I'm mistaken in my perception of what you just presented to us. It just seems like you're blazing a new trail on a lot of fronts that I don't.
Well, proceeds part of it.
Yeah, but am I wrong in that person? I would ask this group, not Kirby.
No, I think you're right in that the argument is that wealthy people got a tax benefit,
Yeah.
that this is deductions that wealthy people get to take. So they aren't going to pay more taxes. They just, what they aren't paying to the feds, they're going to pay to us is the rub.
I would say most of the benefit just, it's just the making the act of 2016 permanent. The 37% rate. Remember in 2016, they had the act, and they brought the top rate down to 37%. It was temporary.
Yeah.
And all HR 1 did was it made 37% permanent. So this is, I mean, if they had not done anything, it would have gone up to 39.6%.
Right.
But I think when people are talking about the tax break, they're talking about the fact that it didn't go up to 39.6.
We're back.
So, I mean.
But I mean, it's philosophical as to what a fair share is. That view tends to be influenced by where you sit. Our job is to try and sift that out and see if we can come to a relative agreement as to what is fair. Based on the circumstances. Maybe it is fair to put a temporary thing in to capitalize the school construction fund. And maybe that's where we need a surcharge. On the other hand, before we get out of here, I've been anticipating a Snelling surcharge at some point being needed. And I've voted for them in the past when we've been looking at major cuts in the safety net. And those surcharges are generally temporary, got a set time frame. And are for a specific purpose of capitalizing maybe the construction fund would work. But I don't think you can go to that well twice. So a lot of it is trying to figure out what might happen in DC, and you know, if we have another set of floods, I would be surprised if we get a whole lot of FEMA cooperation at this point. I'd be happy if ICE didn't show up here now. There's just a lot of unknowns out there. And nothing is working in a predictable manner. So I'm going to try and keep us in the information gathering mode as long as we can. And then make decisions once we're comfortable. I am not at all sure that those are going to be unanimous decisions, but I don't want to rush the judgment and do perhaps more harm than good. So that's my personal philosophy. I tend to be conservative when it comes to money. But we do have a fiduciary responsibility to the people of Vermont. So we'll see where this goes. Anyone who has anyone they'd like to hear from, Brock, if you know an actual.
Well, I do. I mean, there's several organizations. My intern, he's here this week. I'm going to put him to work on that. We've had people like the Tax Foundation and others in the past. We haven't recently, but I'm very reluctant to solely hear from people who have a single point of view and not get a balanced point of view so that we can make decisions on the basis of hearing all the evidence. We haven't been lately.
I think on some of these issues, there is no middle. There's both sides. And we're gonna have to figure the middle, but.
The Tax Foundation would come in here.
Yeah,
Oh, I know
we've had them here before.
I thought it was last year. I know I talked to them and had them
It
in.
was the year before, but in any case, we
Maybe
have had them here, and
Yeah,
They,
last week they said if you just come up.
Foundation for
We
Government
need to hear
Accountability is
from them.
another that we can. bring.
and perhaps your intern could trace down the academic study that's been done on behavioral change. See what is out there.
It's been a couple years, but a couple of years ago, Craig Bolio was tax commissioner. When
Until
ideas like this circulated around the building, they had done their own analysis of, they can actually look at those 250 taxpayers and see what's occurring. And they had a perspective in data. I don't know if they could update that and come in and give us a look at it. But I agree with that.
Come over. I've got tax coming in on almost all of these for what they can tell us about Vermont's mix,
What's going in, what's going out.
what's going in, what's going out.
Problem is, as I recall, one of the problems that we had was, and Craig Bollier was quite honest about it, is there are certain points that we can't measure. We can measure the dollar value of people who come to Vermont, for example, from other states, because we can see the tax return. When people leave, we don't have that same perspective. And that was a missing piece, a valuable missing piece of information.
Well,
Now, we can think about it.
Here's what's really missing.
Yeah.
You don't know who's not coming.
Yeah.
Well,
Because they look at the tax environment here and they say, no, thank you.
And that, I think, is. We did away with that fifth tax bracket.
Yeah.
And kind of collapsed it. Because we were trying to be more competitive, basically with other New England states. And when the tax foundation reports, it was always that top tax bracket. And didn't say, well, yeah, but your bottom and you only pay, the bottom rate on your first, and your actual tax bill may not be as high as Massachusetts, even though your top rate is high. Because you only pay it on that top increment. So we lowered it. But in collapsing it, that top tax bracket now has, and Martine, I see your hand, I'll get you. I'm wondering if we are discouraging doctors, especially like first year primary care docs, that we are desperate, or psychiatrists, which we are desperate to get, child psychiatrists. They can practice at Dartmouth. Just have to drive across the bridge to enjoy Vermont. We're never gonna be New Hampshire, but I don't want us to doubly handicap ourselves. Senator Kulik.
I don't want to oversimplify, but wouldn't we have a surfeit of homes and apartments if we were really pricing ourselves out of the market? I mean, it seems like we would have a mass exodus of people, which we're not seeing. And Scott, to your point, we don't know how many people aren't coming to Vermont because we don't have homes for them. So I don't know. I know this may sound like an oversimplification, but I don't see the gloom and doom that this seems to be portrayed right now.
Maybe, I don't know, if maybe we can, yeah, I see the homes that are being built are 750,000, 1.2. I don't know who's building them, whether they're non-residents or residents, but if we have a way of looking at what permits have been signed across the state over a number of years, we might be able to tell.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody can give us that data or not.
Well, then a second home tax seems to be an appropriate way of,
Well, I think that is, at least the bill is going to come through. If it makes it all the way, I don't know how the votes will go. But I think the intent is to do that. And that will pick up the non-resident millionaires that enjoy Vermont but do not pay a tax here. That will pick them up. The question is, do we at the same time add tax to our 1,000 millionaires that live here and pay Vermont's top tax rate? And then how do you do that? And we'll find out what all those tax exceptions are and see if we can figure out how much we'd actually make by making those taxable in Vermont.
Yeah.
But those go probably much further down the tax, the income scale. So at this point, we are in information gathering.
I think it's important too, Senator Cummings, to remember that right now, as we sit here, on average, somebody that owns a non-homestead property home is probably paying on average a 50% higher tax rate than somebody that has a homestead. I mean, they're already paying a 50% premium.
Wait,
Because of the
second
property
homeowner?
tax credit.
Sure, they're not eligible for the property tax credit. They pay on average, I think the non-homestead average rate is 7 to 10 cents greater than the homestead.
Not in Stowe anymore.
Okay, on
They've
average,
they've-
it's across the
they've
state, it's higher by 8-10 cents. They're not eligible for property tax. They're already paying
Okay.
50%
Okay.
more.
Well,
I think, I'm not saying that's an argument to not do more or less, but I think it's just important that we understand they are already paying.
they are paying probably on more expensive.
Yeah.
Look, counter argument is that homesteaders are here paying income tax, sales tax, they're paying gas tax, they're contributing to our economy year round. So there is some compensating factor that the fact that their houses are occupied by
Well,
Vermonters.
They pay
Other
sales
than
tax
income
when they're here,
tax.
and they pay their taxes in their, they pay their taxes in their own state,
Half as much.
in their home state.
Or if their home state has no income, income tax is the big one. If you live in a no income tax state, if they're here. And everything we've heard anecdotally is they go out, they pay sales tax, they pay rooms and meals every time they go out to eat. If they buy gas while they're here, they pay our gas tax.
But the point I think of the second home is they're not here that much, like they're here to ski a few weekends and so, but that's a large amount of time they're
They
not.
could be here
Sure.
3, 4, 5 months.
I think the point of them, when they're not here, is that they're actually spending money by not being here. They're employing local trade people to mow lawn, to plow the driveway, to fix their house. I mean, I have plenty of folks in my network of contractors that get paid very well to go change 3 air filters in nice second homes. So they're supporting the economy.
But not as much, somebody lives here and there's an opportunity cost of that vacant house. So that house, it's not housing a Vermonter that is contributing, would be contributing a lot more to the economy and it's constraining our housing market, driving housing costs. I don't say I don't want them here. I'm just saying I'm okay with taxing empty vacant second homes a little bit more to align our housing priorities with our tax policy.
If you knew the amount of money that some of these folks are spending to upgrade their property when they are here and supporting the local economy by hiring people in the trades, you'd be pretty surprised at big that number.
Great series of studies to be done, so we have factual evidence as opposed to anecdotal.
We could
And I think
ask,
that would be, I think we'd be surprised in what we get, but
we can ask the home builders to come in and talk to us.
Yeah,
Well,
They usually go to housing, but
I want both groups, I want more of both.
we could use with this increase, especially younger families with children. We need more population, and to get that, we need more housing. We need a tax code that is. We can get the workers, but we gotta get the company executives to come here too. In order to have the jobs to bring the workers, so, you know, it's finding the balance. Okay.
Casinos, you know, from casinos.
We need 2 of them, you're right.
Where is
One vote, one
the
say no.
list
Perfect.
of, I know,
We got the
I'm gonna
land.
send you out of here. Because I know a couple of you had nasty drives in this morning and it's snowing